Hi, so we're going to talk about lesson 3 on the destructors. I've given you seven questions that you have to do, and I'm just going to have a quick chat about some of the things to consider while you're answering the questions. So the first question, it's actually got a lot of questions in it, the first question, but the first question talks about the gang in terms of the age and the beauty of the house. The house is described as being beautiful. And the importance with that is, they're destroying the house. The title of the story is The Destructors. The idea is they want to destroy something that's beautiful. There's no point in destroying something that's already partially destroyed or something that's ugly or is in some way not attractive. There's a significance to the concept of taking something down that's truly beautiful. It's a little bit like, the devil trying to corrupt somebody who's already corrupt. What would be the purpose in that, right? You want to corrupt somebody who is completely immaculate. They're pure. So that was the goal there. And it's what the house represents. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But the age and beauty of the house is an attraction to Trevor and the gang, because when they destroy something, they want to make sure they're destroying something that truly is beautiful, and the house is beautiful. Now, Blackie and Trevor have this competition and for leadership of the gang. Blackie wants to do one thing, Trevor wants to do another. The gang votes, and although they're voting on what the activity is going to be, they're also voting on who the leader is going to be, because whoever's activity they choose, that is the leader. And you'll notice that in the end, Trevor wins because Blackie wanted to pinch free rides on public transit, see how many times they could get on a bus without paying, whereas Trevor wants to destroy this house. And the gang decides, let's destroy the house. So Trevor's choice wins. Trevor wins. He's the leader. Blackie starts moving across the parking lot. He's kind of kicking stones and saying, I'm out of here. This sucks. And you'll notice he gets to the other side of the parking lot and he realizes, wait a second. If in fact they do succeed and they destroy this house, they're going to be the most famous gang in all of London. And I think I want to be part of that. So when you think about it, Blackie is quite a noble character in this story because he's willing to compromise his own kind of standing. How many of us would be willing to be a leader of a particular organization and have that taken away from us and still be willing to participate within that organization, but follow orders from somebody else, somebody that had just usurped your position? And Blackie decides to do that, so he is quite noble. He gives of himself to the greater good of the collective, and they decide, yeah, let's go and let's destroy the house. And there are a few moments in the story where Blackie kind of actually rises to Trevor's defense. So clearly you can see he's a pretty good man. There's no hard feelings. He's willing to take on a role of a minor player within the gang. Now, we've got the seriousness with which the gang approaches the task. You'll notice something. It's it's Trevor's idea to destroy the house. But once they start destroying the house, you realize there's no real leadership anymore. Everybody kind of falls into line and they start kind of focusing in on the task at hand. Now, I wouldn't expect you to pick up on this, but what Graham Greene is doing is he's kind of using the gang as a metaphor and their attack on this house as this concept of communism, right? The idea that, again, it's the collective. And you'll notice there are no leaders because truly in the Communist Manifesto, the idea is you've got people who are leaders that capture the imagination of the masses, but once everybody has bought into the concept of communism, we're all equal. And everybody in the gang is equal. They're all equally trying to do one thing, and that is destroy the house. And each person is putting in their own very best effort to get to that particular result in the end, to destroy the house. So they are very serious with their task. And it's amazing what they do because you think about it, there's no large machinery at hand here. They're destroying this house almost virtually with their bare hands. They're using hand saws and they're using hammers. They use a sledgehammer, screwdrivers, but basic tools. So they're very focused, they're very organized, and they work collectively together. And nobody is really more important than anybody else. The most important thing is, again, the task at hand, and that's to destroy the house. So that's the seriousness with which they kind of approach this. Now, we get to the burning of the banknotes. And for some of you, if you're like me, I remember the first time I read this story, I found that quite disturbing. You're destroying money, but understand what Trevor's doing here. He can't take that money and spend it, right? I mean, at the end, when the gang goes home the first night and it's just Trevor and Blackie left in the house, and Trevor pulls out old Misery's money, he's got about 70 pounds there, and they start burning all of the pound notes. The reason he's doing that is to show that their cause is noble. If Trevor takes the money and he spends it, I don't know, he buys candy or something with it, then he's just a common thief. But if you haven't seen it at this point, symbolically, this gang is a revolution. And we might as well cut to the chase now. The house is the house, but the house represents the class system. Trevor's come down in the world. Trevor used to be wealthy, if you remember at the beginning of the story, and they lost everything. His dad was an architect, but now, he's unemployed. And so they're impoverished. But Trevor knows what he's missing because he used to have more than he has now. Whereas the rest of the gang, they've got nothing and they never had anything. So they don't know what they're missing because they're not missing anything. They've never had it. Trevor has. And so by destroying the house represents the class system. The gang is not a gang, but it's the revolution. And it's the revolution against the class system, the upper class, the middle class, the lower class, the allocation of the classes. Trevor wants to see that destroyed because he sees it as being inherently unfair. And so when he burns the banknotes, what he's doing is he's reflecting on the fact that money is the root of all evil. Money is what's made the class system the class system. Without money, we wouldn't be allocated into these different classes. So he can't spend it because then he's no better than anybody else. But if he destroys it, then his desires are glorious. Right? He can be respected as this revolutionary leader who has this kind of unassailable goal to make the world as equitable and fair as possible. And again, as Graham Greene has suggested, bringing communism into play, because communism is a more equitable form of political organization than, let's say, something like capitalism, where you see these, huge discrepancies between wealth. At this point in time, let's say in 2020 in the world, approximately 50% of the world's wealth is controlled by about 1% of the world's population. That means that 99% of the people that live on the planet today basically are having to share the other 50% of the wealth. Graham Greene, when he wrote the story, that wasn't the case. It wasn't that great a discrepancy. But clearly he saw the world in the 1950s as being, inequitable. And clearly today we can make that argument that there isn't a fair distribution of wealth. And so that's the purpose with the burning of the banknotes. He's got to destroy the money. He can't profit by it, or he's just a common thief as opposed to a revolutionary. And lastly, how do they feel towards old Misery? Because when they're burning the banknotes, actually, Blackie says to Trevor, wow, you must really hate old Misery. And Trevor says it's not about love and hate. What it's about is it's about the revolution. He doesn't say it that explicitly, but it's the idea that, for lack of a better phrase, the old adage, sometimes you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. In a revolution, innocent people die. It's impossible to have a revolution and not have innocent people die. Just like in war, innocent people die. Women and children are going to die. And so Trevor is saying, I got nothing against old Misery, but he represents the upper class. He's got to come down. He has to be destroyed. Not because of him personally, but who he represents and everybody like him. Okay? Now, the lorry driver. You'll notice at the end of the story, the lorry driver jumps in his car, starts driving away, feels the tug, all the bricks come flying by the cab of his truck. A lorry is British for a truck. He's a truck driver. He gets out of the truck, he sees the rope tied to the house, realizes he's pulled down the last vestiges of the house, and he laughs. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, think about who the lorry driver represents. He's the common man, right? He's the lower class to the middle class. And he laughs because he sees the house was a nice house. It's destroyed. The rich guy got his. And that's what Graham Greene is saying. This is the reaction that the lower classes are going to have. They're not going to feel sorry for the upper class in a revolution when they're destroyed. They're going to say it's about time. We've been screwed over our entire lives, and now it's about time that the rich guy got his. And so Graham Greene is using that as a bit of a warning. the idea is who's going to read Graham Greene's story? There are going to be some upper class and some middle class people who are going to read this short story, and it's a warning to them. Nobody wants to have misfortune and have people laugh at them, but he's saying, if you want people to be able to have empathy for you, you have to consider them as well. And in a class system, clearly you're not considering them to that point, so that when bad stuff happens, poor people are going to laugh at you. So that's what the lorry truck driver kind of represented in the story. Now, what did the two things they were voting on have in common? Remember, they were voting on, do we ride on the metro for free, or do we destroy the house? Well, now that we know that the house represents the class system, what you're doing is you're challenging the system that you live in, right, by destroying that house. And when you ride on public transit, think about what public transit's for. Public transit is, again, to get people within the system moving around. And so if you get free rides, if you don't pay, you're not financially supporting that. So in actual fact, when the gang was deciding what two things they were going to do, both of their choices represent challenging the system and the functioning of that system. So those were purposeful choices. They were symbolic choices to represent a challenge to the system that existed in the time frame that the gang existed. Now, significance of Blitz London. I actually attached at the bottom of the questions, there's a YouTube address where you can go and you can watch this video. It's an old video from the 40s. And here's the significance that you wouldn't have picked up on, but most people, if they read the story in 1950, they would pick up on it, because 1950 was 5 years after World War II ended. World War II ran from 1939 to 1945. So in 1950, World War II had just recently ended. And you can imagine in London, there would still be some remnants of Blitz London. Blitz London is when the Nazis flew over London and they used to bomb London every night. And in one particular bombing, they went over the area where St. Paul's Cathedral was, and they just leveled the neighborhood. Amazingly, though, the next morning when people got up out of the tube station and witnessed the destruction, although the neighborhood was completely destroyed, it was a moonscape, St. Paul's Cathedral was untouched. So you've got this incredible view of just a complete moonscape. It's just rubble, and then there's this beautiful St. Paul's Cathedral, and it's still standing. And that was a huge shot in the arm for the British, because they realized, you didn't do it. You tried to destroy us, but we still had something survive, and it was St. Paul's Cathedral. Well, St. Paul's Cathedral was designed by Wren. And you'll notice at the beginning of the short story, Old Misery's house is also designed by Wren. And you'll notice that the gang live in Blitz London. London is completely destroyed, and the only thing that's standing is this beautiful house of Old Misery's. That's the parallel. So anyone reading the story in 1950 would quickly make that connection because of Wren. Wren designed Old Misery's house. Wren designed St. Paul's Cathedral. St. Paul's Cathedral stood while everything around it was destroyed, and Old Misery's house stands while everything around it's destroyed. So that's the connection between the two. So if you watch the video, you'll see some of the visuals. I wanted you to get a visual because clearly that wouldn't be in your mind's eye, but anyone in 1950 reading this short story, they would see the kinds of things you're going to see in that quick little video. I think it's about maybe 3 or 4 minutes long. So if you watch that, you'll get a sense for what Graham Greene was trying to do. He was trying to invoke those kinds of visuals for the reader. Okay? Now, Trevor's name. They don't call him Trevor, they call him T. Simply because Trevor is a class name. Okay? If they call him Trevor, it's a constant reminder that Trevor doesn't belong with the gang, because the gang are lower class, and Trevor at one point was upper class. He's now come down in the world, but his name still invokes this idea of the upper class. It's like his name is, Quincy Up Smythe the Fourth or something like that. If that was your name, every time someone heard that name, they'd think, wow, that guy's upper class. So that's why they call him T. The gift of chocolates, Old Misery gives the kids chocolates. The kids are suspicious of this, and the reason they're suspicious of it is because they don't have disposable income. The gang can't understand how anybody could buy something and give it to somebody else. Like, they don't have spare money to do that. So when Old Misery does that, they think in some way he's trying to buy them off. And that's just kind of a social commentary, again, to make us feel sympathy or pathos for the gang, like those poor little kids. They've got no concept for kindness. They don't understand it. They haven't experienced it because it's not a particular option within their life. to have extra money to buy something for someone else. Even the term beautiful, right? I mean, if you're upper class, you might be able to spend an afternoon in an art gallery looking at paintings and saying, oh, aren't these paintings beautiful? The gang's not going to be able to do that. So when Trevor comes and says, hey, I saw this house, it's beautiful, they're about to attack him because they don't understand that idea of being able to appreciate beauty. And again, it's a bit of a social commentary to understand that they're limited in the opportunities that they have. Once he says it's beautiful, we'll destroy it, they understand destruction, right? Because again, their neighborhood is destroyed. So destroying something beautiful, yeah, we're all for that. They can get on that. And we already talked about love and hate, right? The idea of loving and hating old misery. Again, it's not love and hate. It's nothing personal. You got to be mechanical. In a revolution, you have to be mechanical and you just do the job and you don't worry about innocent people. You're going to have collateral damage in a revolution. It's just the way it is. Trevor says, please. You remember at the end of the story? One of the gang comes back and says, oh, old misery's coming home early. We got to get out of here. And the gang wants to leave. And Trevor says, no, wait. Just give me a second to think. And Trevor's trying to think of a way to still do it because the house isn't destroyed yet. And he wants to destroy the house, whereas the rest of the gang, they're just worried about getting caught. And therein lies the difference. The gang, they're worried about getting caught and getting in trouble. Trevor doesn't fear getting caught. Trevor fears not destroying the house. And that's what makes him truly dangerous. I mean, imagine as a revolutionary, if you're worried about getting caught, you're going to be careful. You're probably not going to be successful or as successful as someone who has no fear of getting caught. If your biggest fear is not succeeding, then you're willing to die for a cause. Anyone that's willing to die for a cause is truly dangerous. Trevor is truly dangerous because he says, please. I mean, he begs them not to go because, again, his fear is not getting caught. It's not succeeding. And the rest of the gang, their fear is getting caught. So they're not as invested as Trevor is. You can see that Trevor is truly dangerous, and Graham Greene is saying that's what happens. You create a class system where you give nobody a hope, they're going to want to destroy that system, and that's the only thing they're going to want to do, and that will make them truly dangerous because they could care less if they get caught. It's like death isn't much worse than life, so I got nothing to lose. When you got nothing to lose, you are dangerous. You'll also notice Blackie at that moment. Remember the gang kind of turn on him and start mocking him. Oh, please, please. And they're making fun of him. And Blackie kind of comes to his defense and says, what do you need, T? So again, Blackie is this kind of noble hero. He lost his leadership position, but he's all in and he's willing to support Trevor. Trevor has captured Blackie's imagination. Blackie is totally in support of the revolution. And lastly, what are the gang's good qualities? They're industrious, right? They're hardworking. They're intelligent. They're noble. They're trustworthy, right? They all work together. And the point that Graham Greene's making is that, poor people have dreams too. They have hopes too. And they're a valuable commodity. And you could tap into that. So what are you going to do? Because either way, the gang, they're going to express their talents. And they're only going to do it either for good or for evil. And in this case, they're doing it for evil, right? They're trying to overthrow the system. So Graham Greene is saying, with the lower classes, with the impoverished, you have to give them hope. You have to give them opportunity. And if you do, they will rise to the occasion and they will do incredible things. But if you don't give them hope, if you don't give them options, they're still going to rise to the occasion and do incredible things, but those incredible things will be incredibly destructive. Okay? So hopefully that discussion helped you a little bit. Again, make sure that you finish off the homework on time. There is a deadline. Again, the deadline's still the same. It's going to be Wednesday at 11:59. So don't wait till the last minute. Finish it off early. You've got the answers. You got the information. Go through and again, submit it on the team platform, right? If it's late, it's late, and I'm not going to mark it. I'm going to start shutting it down, right? So you need to submit this work on time. So have a lovely day, and we will see you next day in class. Bye-bye.